In the spring of 1923, renovation workers in Claiborne County, Mississippi, pried open a hidden compartment in the study of an antebellum mansion and pulled out a leather-bound diary. Its pages were brittle, its ink the color of dried blood. 3 people read the first entries that week. All 3 refused, for the rest of their lives, to speak of what they had seen. One whispered only, "It is the most honest record of evil I have ever touched." This is the story that waited 72 years to be told. The story of Belmont Plantation, and the woman who dared to write its hidden sins into eternity. Stay with me. Because what lived inside that big White House was far darker, far stranger, and far closer to divine reckoning than anyone in that quiet county ever imagined. If this is your first time stepping into these shadows with us, welcome. We do not tell ghost stories here. We open tombs. Real ones. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and let the bell remind you when the next layer is peeled back. While you settle in, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Your city, your state. I want to know who was walking these haunted acres with me. Now, open the diary with me. You must first see Belmont the way the land itself saw it. 340 acres of black alluvial soil that seemed almost alive, drinking rain and blood in equal measure. The Mississippi Delta heat pressed down like the hand of an angry god, heavy, unrelenting, turning cotton into gold and men into monsters. Nearby, the little town of Port Gibson pretended at civilization, white church steeples, brick sidewalks, ladies in crinoline who never spoke above a whisper about the things they all knew. Discretion was their gospel. Silence, their sacrament. Belmont was not the largest plantation in the county, but it wore its prosperity like a crown of thorns. The big house rose at the end of a tunnel of live oaks, their branches draped in Spanish moss that swayed like funeral veils in the hot wind. Greek Revival columns, 4 perfect white sentinels, held up a gallery where no one ever sat too long after dusk. Shutters stayed closed against the sun and the flies and, perhaps, against the eyes of heaven. The house looked eternal. It was built to lie. In 1823, Hezekiah Hargrove rode in from South Carolina with 2 wagons, a letter of credit, and 23 souls chained behind him. He bought the raw land cheap and set about turning wilderness into empire. By all accounts he was not unusually cruel. Which meant he was cruel enough. He understood the arithmetic of flesh and fiber, break the body just enough to keep the spirit working, never enough to stop the hands. He built the big house in 1827, white brick, wide galleries, every detail screaming permanence. He added kitchens, smokehouses, slave quarters, all in careful stages, as though constructing a temple to a god whose name no one dared speak aloud. When Hezekiah died in 1844, his son Edmund inherited everything, including the weight of a lie already generations deep. Edmund was 31, married to Catherine née Leland of Natchez, father to little Harlan and Adelaide. He had attended college for a season before his father yanked him home to learn the real curriculum, how to rule without ever admitting you rule by fear. Edmund kept a journal. Not the diary we found that came later, but his own careful ledger of weather, yields, prices, births, deaths. He wrote like a man building a monument to his own decency. Cotton at 12 cents in New Orleans. Drought cost 14 bales. Clara born 1846, taken by fever before her first birthday. Polite, measured, bloodless. He never wrote the sounds that drifted up from the quarters at night. He never wrote the smell that sometimes clung to his own clothes after an overseer's visit. He never wrote what he chose not to see. And that is where the second hand enters, like the finger of God tracing judgment across the same pages. The 1923 workers thought the book was Edmund's alone. His name was on the cover in that tight, controlled script. But when Mrs. Edna Farrar, the county historical preservationist, turned the pages under lamplight, the handwriting shattered mid-sentence. March 14, 1851. Edmund had been complaining about a broken cotton gin. The sentence stopped cold, the cost of repair from Vicksburg will amount to no less than 30. Then a blank line. Then a new hand. Smaller. Fiercer. Pressing so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. My name is not written here because it cannot be safely written. But I have lived at Belmont since I was 9 years old and I am now past 30. I have seen enough. I know enough. And since no one will ever ask me what I know, I will write it here, in the only place my words cannot be taken from me. If you are reading this, then either I am gone or the world has changed enough that truth may finally breathe. Either way, know what happened here. Mrs. Farrar read those lines 3 times. Her hands shook. She closed the book, opened it again, and the second voice spoke plainly for the first time. The writer was a woman. Enslaved. The woman who cleaned Edmund Hargrove's study, laid his fires, dusted his books, and unbeknownst to him read every word he had ever written. She had learned her letters in secret at age 9, taught by the dying mistress before consumption took her. 20 years she had hidden that dangerous light behind her eyes. 20 years she had waited. She signed every entry only with the letter R. If this is found before the time is right, she wrote, I will not have my name used against the living I have tried to shield. R is enough. R is me. R has always been enough. Historians would spend decades trying to name her. Plantation ledgers listed a housekeeper named Ruth, 35 in 1851, brought to Belmont as a child the year the first mistress died. Most scholars now believe R was Ruth. But they will never be certain. Because Ruth, or whoever R truly was, moved through that diary like a prophet in hiding. Layer by layer. Never more than she had to. Always leaving something in reserve. She had survived by knowing exactly when to speak and when to become stone. Read the diary correctly and you understand it is 2 gospels of the same place. Edmund wrote from the throne room, production numbers, labor assignments. The price of bagging cloth from Port Gibson. He wrote of his children with the warm, slightly theatrical affection of a man performing fatherhood for an invisible audience. He wrote of Catherine occasionally, mostly as an extension of household management. In April 1851 he noted the hiring of a new overseer, Denton Rook, recommended from Jefferson County. A capable man, firm but fair. 6 days later, R answered in the margin like the voice of God correcting a liar. He is not fair. He has been here 6 days and I have already seen 3 things I will not write down, because to write them is to carry them in my body every time I read them back. The previous overseer was brutal in a way you could brace for. This one smiles. This one speaks to Mr. Hargrove in the soft voice of a friend and makes him believe whatever he wishes to believe. The things this man does, he does them quietly. Then he sits at supper discussing cotton futures while I watch Mr. Hargrove nod and think he has made a wise hire. Mr. Hargrove is not a stupid man. But he has decided there are things he does not want to know. And a man who chooses not to know is sometimes more dangerous than one who simply cannot see. That single passage has been called one of the most devastating psychological portraits of complicity ever left by an enslaved witness. Because her understood the architecture of evil better than any scholar who would later study her words. She saw that the big house was not maintained by the master's strength. It was maintained by the intelligence, the labor, the silent endurance of the very people he believed he owned. The house itself had 11 rooms on the main floors and 3 low attic spaces used for storage and, in busy seasons, for exhausted bodies to sleep. The basement was a root cellar. It was also, are noted with chilling flatness, a place where people are sometimes put to think. Inside the house worked a small, tightly knit domestic staff, 4 to 7 souls depending on the season. R named them as they named themselves, never the ledger names. There was Dia, the cook, middle-aged, a burn scar running up her right forearm like a brand from the fire itself. Dia remembered every recipe, every remedy, every face that had ever sat at that table. She knows things about this family the family does not know about itself, R wrote. She has watched them eat for 20 years. She knows who sleeps poorly, who drinks in secret, who cries before dawn and who has forgotten how. There was Thomas, perhaps 18 or 19, strong enough for heavy work yet gentle enough to serve at table without spilling a drop. R wrote of him with a tenderness she allowed nowhere else. He reads numbers like scripture. He calculates weights, distances, time in his head faster than any white man here dares admit. His anger is a quiet fire. He banks it every day so it will not burn him alive. And then there was Nance, 12, maybe 13. A child still. R's entries about Nance are the hardest to read, not because of what she says, but because of the space around the words. The careful, trembling restraint. Nance is not yet grown. And this house is not a safe place for a girl who is not yet grown. I am doing what I can. It is not enough. I know it is not enough. I write it here because writing is the only act that does not destroy me completely. She never spelled out the threat. She did not have to. The silence around her words is louder than any scream. And then there was Catherine Hargrove, the mistress of the house. Edmund barely described her. R described her like a woman staring into the abyss and choosing, every single day, where to place her feet. Mrs. Hargrove is not a cruel woman, R wrote in June of 1851. She is something harder to name. She knows, I think, more than she will ever admit she knows. She has learned that knowing and saying are two entirely different countries. She sees what happens here, some. Stay with me. Because the pages that follow do not merely describe cruelty, they dissect the precise moment when denial dies, and something far more dangerous takes its place, awakening. Catherine did not speak of what she witnessed that afternoon. She did not need to. Within the hour she appeared in the kitchen doorway, pale as new linen, and sat at the long pine table without a word. R was peeling sweet potatoes, the knife moving in the same steady rhythm it always did. She did not stop. She did not look up immediately. But she felt the air change, the way it does when lightning is still miles away but already charging the sky. Minutes passed. Catherine's hands lay flat on the table, fingers spread, trembling just enough that the light caught it. Then she spoke, voice so low it barely carried across the room. Ruth. It was the first time Catherine had ever used her name. Not the housekeeper. Not you. Ruth. R set the knife down. Turned. Met the eyes that had always before slid past her like water over stone. I saw, Catherine said. That was all. R did not ask what. She already knew. Everyone in the quarters knew what Denton Rook did when he thought no one of importance was watching. The difference was that now someone of importance had watched. Catherine drew a breath that sounded like cloth tearing. I thought there were lines. Places even he would not cross. R said nothing. There was nothing safe to say. I was wrong, Catherine finished, then she stood, smoothed her skirts with hands that still shook, and walked out. She left behind the smell of fear, sharp, metallic, the same smell that sometimes drifted up from the fields after dusk. From that day forward, Catherine began asking questions. Not the casual inquiries of a mistress checking on linens or preserves. Real questions. Careful ones. Delivered in whispers, always in corners of the house where voices did not carry, the pantry with the door half closed, the back stairwell at twilight, the buttery when the rest of the staff was occupied elsewhere. Who was in the south field last Thursday evening? What did you hear about the girl called Mercy after she was sent to the smokehouse? Does anyone speak of Rook outside these walls? R answered slowly. A little at a time. Testing. Watching Catherine's face for the telltale flinch, the quick glance away, the tightening of the mouth that said she already knew the answer but needed to hear it spoken aloud to make it real. In September 1851, R wrote. She is asking because something has broken open inside her. Rook has been here 5 months. Whatever she saw from that window was not the first time, but it was the time she could no longer look past. I do not trust her yet. Trust is a luxury we cannot afford. But I answer her. Carefully. Because if she is turning, even a fraction, that turn might mean something larger than either of us can yet see. Or it might mean nothing at all, and I will have given away pieces of safety for no return. I live between those two possibilities every hour I breathe. The diary makes clear that Catherine never became an ally in any simple sense. She remained the mistress. She still signed the orders for provisions. She still corrected the children's posture at table. She still wore the keys to the storerooms on the chatelaine at her waist. But the woman who had once believed Belmont was different now carried the knowledge that it was not. And knowledge like that does not sit quietly. It works. It changes the angle of every decision. Our watched her the way a sentry watches a horizon. Not with hope. With calculation. Meanwhile, Denton Rook continued his own silent campaign. He was not the brute his predecessor Stokes had been. Stokes had beaten men in the open, left welts that everyone could see and count. Rook preferred subtler weapons, division, suspicion, the slow unraveling of the only armor the enslaved had ever possessed each other. He learned names. Not just the ledger names, but the names people called each other in the dark. He learned who shared tobacco, who mended whose clothes, who prayed together when no one was looking. He learned who feared being separated from a child, who feared the lash less than the loss of kin. And he pressed exactly where the structure was weakest. R described him with chilling clarity. The man does not strike out of anger. He dissects because the dissection interests him. He finds the thread that holds two lives together and draws it slowly until the whole cloth begins to fray. A man who hates will eventually tire. A man who finds pleasure in solving the puzzle of how to break human trust will never tire. There is always another knot to untie. By late autumn 1851, R's entries grew shorter. Tighter. The long, reflective passages gave way to clipped observations, abbreviations, fragments written in haste. Kitchen, door, P past, silence. Thomas to Port Gibson, returned, word from Riverman, details later. P in quarters, told him everything I have seen, long quiet, he said, knowledge first. Action follows. Historians call this shift the encoding phase. R was no longer merely witnessing. She was organizing. Coordinating. Building something invisible beneath the visible surface of plantation life. She wrote of a man she called only P, never a full name. A field hand others listened to even when he spoke softly. The kind of man whose silence changes the wind around him, she wrote. In December she recorded their meeting. I told P what I have recorded here. All of it I could remember without the book. He listened without moving. When I finished he sat a long time. Then he said only, we must know everything before we can do anything. I told him I was still gathering. He looked at me then, not with pity, not with anger, but with the recognition of a man who has carried the same understanding for years that I have only just begun to carry. He said, I know you are. What were they gathering toward? Not flight, at least not primarily. Though the diary honors those who had already slipped away, names spoken in careful blank spaces, details withheld like protective prayers, the larger project was more audacious. On March 3, 1852, R set down what scholars now call her declaration, the passage that reframes the entire document. I have come to see clearly at last. The only thing that outlasts flesh is record. Bodies return to earth and earth is forgetful. Words can be burned, mouths silenced, names erased until no proof remains that any soul ever thought or suffered or hoped here. Those who hold power understand this above all else. True dominion is the dominion over memory. We have none of their instruments, no land, no coin, no law, no iron. But we have eyes. We have tongues that still move in the dark. We have what we have witnessed. If we can preserve that witness, if we can hide it so that it survives the hands that would destroy it, then we will have struck a blow that echoes beyond our graves. Not freedom entire. Not justice complete. But something. And something is enough to begin. The diary was never just a journal. It was evidence. A deliberate, collaborative archive compiled in secret by Ruth, R. D. Thomas, P., and perhaps others whose names she shielded even in her private pages. They documented not for immediate escape, but for a future court they might never live to see, one in which the truth of Belmont would finally be read aloud. Edmund Hargrove's entries for 1852 read like bulletins from another world. March, cotton prospects favorable. April, eastern fence requires mending. May, attended barbecue at Belmont Plantation, pleasant evening. June, field hand absconded. Not recovered. July, excessive heat. R's entries for the same months are compressed fury. The June runaway, Calvin, was no impulsive flight. Weeks of preparation, whispered routes, river contacts, signals. Our wrote of it with restrained mourning. Calvin is gone. I pray he has reached the hands that were waiting. I pray the place he sleeps tonight has no overseer's shadow across it. I pray most of all that what we did to help him does not come back on those who remain. We were careful. Careful is never enough when every wall has ears and some of those ears trade secrets for safety. Calvin vanished cleanly. Edmund never mentioned him again. But Rook noticed the silence. He began moving differently, entering the big house without cause, lingering in doorways, watching the way hands paused, the way glances slid away. He was hunting the mechanism behind the escape. He was hunting the network. In July 1852 R wrote, Rook has come into the house 3 times this week. No errand. No business. He wants to see how we move when we believe ourselves alone. The difference between our public faces and our private ones is information to him. We have practiced stillness all our lives. We are still now. But I watch him watching. He has caught a scent. Not enough to strike. But enough to keep him circling. The tension held through the long Mississippi summer like a bowstring drawn tighter every day without snapping. Then, in August, it snapped. R's entry begins with eerie calm. Rook found paper yesterday morning. Folded. Tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the praise house. Names. Distances. Landmarks. A map of sorts. Not in my hand. Not in any hand I recognize closely. Someone kept me at distance for exactly this reason, so no single breaking would break everything. By evening Edmund knew. By Wednesday they had a name. The entry cuts off mid-sentence. The page is stained, whether ink or something darker, no one can now be certain. What happened next would change Belmont forever. In November 1852, Catherine Hargrove placed the domestic record book in front of R and said 3 words that changed the shape of everything. These cannot be right. R looked at the page. Looked at Catherine. And answered with the calm of someone who had waited years for this exact moment. No, ma'am. They are not right. That silence between them was louder than any scream ever raised on Belmont soil. Stay close. Because what follows is not a simple tale of rescue or revenge. It is the slow, agonizing birth of moral courage in a place designed to strangle it at every turn. It is the story of how one woman's awakening became a weapon, and how even a weapon forged in secret can only cut so deep when the world itself is the wound. After Rook discovered the folded paper in the Praisehouse floorboard, he needed a name. Any name would do. He chose George. George worked the South Fields, steady, quiet, never known to speak out of turn. As far as R could determine, he had no part in the network, no knowledge of the hidden routes or the whispered plans. Rook simply decided George looked guilty. In a place where evidence was optional and accusation was proof, that was enough. R did not describe the questioning in detail. She did not need to. She wrote only what she could bear to set down. I heard it from the house. The sounds carried on the wind like smoke. Dia went to the far corner of the kitchen, pressed her palms flat against the wall, and stayed there until it stopped. George did not confess. He never confessed. After 4 days Rook ceased. Mr. Hargrove wrote one line, matter resolved satisfactorily. No further action required. The surface smoothed over. But surfaces are fragile now. Thinner than paper. Rook did not abandon the hunt. He merely changed his method. September 1852, he no longer searches the obvious places. He searches the shadows behind the shadows. Patient the way a hunter is patient when he smells blood on the breeze but cannot yet see the animal. I have known few men who frighten me with the mind alone. Rook is one. The way he looks at us, one by one, every time he passes through the house, is the same look every time, one of you knows. One of you is the center. I will find you. By autumn, the quiet conversations between R and Catherine had deepened into something perilous and intimate. They spoke in fragments. In stolen minutes. Always in places where sound died against walls or curtains. Catherine asked more. Or answered more, but never everything. She dosed the truth like strong medicine. Too much at once could kill the patient. In late October, I wrote one of the diary's most analyzed passages. I have told her things. Chosen carefully what to give her, the way you measure drops from a bottle. I told her what Rook has done that Mr. Hargrove pretends not to see, which is the same as seeing and choosing silence. I told her about George. I told her about Nance, in words that let her understand without forcing me to speak the unspeakable plain. She listened. Sat motionless for a long time. Then she asked the question I never thought I would hear from her mouth. What do you want me to do? I looked at her. Thought. Then I said, I want you to see it. All of it. I want it to be real inside you, so that when the time comes to account, and it will come, you cannot say you did not know. You know now. You have known for months. What you do with knowing is what will show what kind of woman you truly are. Those words hang in the historical record like smoke that never quite clears. Scholars debate them still. Was our offering alliance? Judgment? A mirror? Catherine did not answer immediately. But she acted. In November she did something almost unheard of for a planter's wife. She requested the domestic ledgers. Not the cotton books Edmund guarded like scripture, those he kept with his factor in Vicksburg. She wanted the house records. The movements of people. The reports Rook submitted monthly. She told Edmund the household had grown disordered since the new overseer. She wished to satisfy herself that all was managed properly. Edmund stared at her a long moment, or noted the pause, then agreed. What Catherine found were not mere errors. They were absences. Gaps. Lies carved into silence. People logged on Monday, vanished from Tuesday through Thursday with no explanation of illness or reassignment. Payments to unnamed parties in Port Gibson that appeared nowhere in the main accounts. Dates when Rook claimed to be overseeing the fields but his own travel notes placed him miles away. Thursday afternoon she brought the ledger to the kitchen. Placed it open before her, pointed to 3 entries. These cannot be right. No, ma'am. They are not. You already knew. Yes, ma'am. For a long time. How long? Since almost the beginning. That exchange, historians agree, was the hinge. Catherine stepped fully out of denial into responsibility. And responsibility demanded action. She wrote a letter. The letter itself does not survive. I never saw it, only heard Catherine describe its outline in careful, guarded phrases, the way people speak of deeds they are not entirely sure were righteous. It went to her father, Thomas Leland of Natchez. A man of wealth, connections, and a cold, evaluating mind. Catherine did not confess moral outrage. She could not. She framed it as a matter of property and order, irregularities in management, concerns about Rook, threats to the smooth operation of an enterprise in which her children's future was invested. Palatable terms. Terms a father might hear without dismissing his daughter as sentimental or hysterical. R listened to the summary and wrote. She is intelligent. She is doing what she can. What she can do is limited. Whether it is enough, we will not know for some time. But it is something. And something here is never nothing. Leland replied swiftly. By December Catherine came to her before dawn, voice low. My father is coming. R said only, good. They looked at each other in the dim kitchen light. No more words passed. That shared silence was the most honest communion they ever achieved. Thomas Leland arrived January 14, 1853. Edmund noted it curtly. Catherine's father arrived from Natchez to stay some days. R documented the visit day by day. Leland was not warm. He was watchful. He walked the fields with Edmund, asked precise questions about yields and answered with Edmund's practiced ease. On the 3rd day he requested a private meeting with Rook. R positioned herself in the hall, slow, purposeful, invisible. The study door was closed. She heard voices for 45 minutes. Leland's tone steady, interrogative. Rook's unruffled at first. Then, near the end, a shift. Rook's voice rose slightly in pitch. Leland spoke very low. Then silence. When Rook emerged, R could not see his face clearly. But an hour later in the yard she caught it, a tightening at the eyes and mouth. Small. Controlled. But unmistakable. Something had pierced the armor. Leland stayed 8 days. Left January 22 with polite farewells. On the gallery he held Catherine's hand a beat longer than custom required. Looked at her. Said little. She said little. The carriage rolled down the Oak Avenue. Catherine watched until dust swallowed it. Then she passed her without a word, climbed the stairs, closed her door. R stood motionless below and thought, now we wait. February 1853, Rook gave notice. Edmund wrote 4 words, Rook has given notice. R wrote pages. He is gone. He left this morning without ceremony. Loaded his wagon. Drove down the avenue. I watched from the 2nd floor window until he vanished. Then I watched longer to be sure. Then I sat on the hall floor, head against the wall, and stayed there a long time. I do not know exactly what Leland did. What he said. What he showed or threatened. But he has means. Connections. Knowledge of pressure points. Something was applied. Rook is gone. That is enough. But it does not undo what he did. It does not restore what was taken. It does not change the foundation of this place. The horror is not one man. The horror is the land, the law, the arrangement of power that lets a man like Rook arrive, wound, depart, and wound again elsewhere. He is gone from Belmont. He is not gone from the world. That is the part one must learn to carry. Rook's exit was the only celebration the diary ever allowed itself, one entry of quiet relief. Then R turned back to the greater work. The diary continued through 1857. The years grew quieter, not because Belmont became just, but because the acute terror Rook embodied was removed. A new overseer, Jarvis, arrived. R assessed him in one line, he is what he appears to be. A sentence that could be praise or damnation, depending on what one already knew of the place. Likely both. In those later years R kept the project alive. She recorded what Edmund never would: births, deaths, separations, small resistances, fragile connections. Names spoken with dignity. Relationships traced like lifelines. The real pulse beneath the ledger's cold arithmetic. She wrote of Thomas growing into quiet authority, a man even Jarvis stepped around. Of Dia anchoring the kitchen like an unmovable stone. Of Nance surviving into womanhood, carrying a strength forged in fire. In 1856, month uncertain, she reflected. I have kept this record 5 years now. Hidden. Careful. I think often of what becomes of it after me. I am no longer young. I have been in this house since childhood. I see the faces around me age. I see my own in the glass. Time moves. So must the words. The entry trails. The next pages wait in shadow. But the question remains, unanswered still: what survives when the hand that wrote it can no longer hold the pen? The light came sideways across the kitchen floor that morning. Dia's coffee tasted better than the day before. Thomas fixed the crooked hinge on the kitchen door without being asked. Nance was well. Word from P came through the usual channels, things held steady. Small repairs needed upstairs. Winter supplies to consider. A child in the quarters recovering from fever. These were not trivial things to her. They were the heartbeat of survival. Then, halfway through the entry, she turned her gaze inward one final time. I have been thinking about what this book truly is. Not the grand purpose I once declared, but the plain fact of it. It is a record of one place. Of the people in it. Of what my eyes saw and my hand could reach. It exists inside another man's record, the one with his name on the cover, the one that speaks of cotton and weather and never of the lives beneath them. Two accounts of the same ground. One loud and official. One quiet, hidden, written in a different hand. The quiet one is truer. Not complete, no single book can hold the whole truth, but honest. It does not look away. She paused on the page. Then continued. I will place this book where it will be safe. I will trust it survives. I will trust that whoever finds it, whenever they find it, however many years later, will feel the weight of these words. What they cost to write. What they cost to keep. So much was taken here. Names overwritten. Families torn apart. Children moved like livestock. Years consumed for another's gain. I could not return any of it. I could not stop the machine from turning. What I could do, what I did, was refuse to let it vanish entirely. I wrote it. It is here. My name is not on the cover. My name is R has always been enough. And then the entry ends. No more lines. No signature beyond the single letter she had used from the beginning. Just blank space after that, as if the pen had been set down gently, deliberately, and never lifted again. After that blank line, Edmund's handwriting resumes. 8 more pages. Cotton prices rising. Offense mended. Dry spring persisting. Polite, measured observations. He never knew the woman who had read every word he wrote for more than a decade had just finished her testimony in the same book. The two voices share the pages but never once address each other. That mutual, careful silence may be the truest portrait of Belmont ever drawn. The plantation continued. Cotton grew. Bales were pressed. Money changed hands. Edmund Hargrove died in 1869, worn down by a long illness 3 years after the world he had known collapsed. Catherine survived him by 11 years, passing in Port Gibson in 1880. Their son Harlan, 16 when her last watched him, lived through war, emancipation, Reconstruction. The Freedmen's Bureau later noted him as one of the fewer Claiborne County planters who entered sharecropping arrangements with former slaves on terms less openly predatory than most. Whether this reflected the boy or saw hesitating on the edge of a moral choice, no one can say with certainty. It remains possible. The people are named Dia, Thomas, Nance, P. fade from the official record by design. Their invisibility to power preserved them from retribution in their time and makes them ghosts in the archive now. Ruth, the housekeeper listed in ledgers as born around 1816, vanishes after 1857. No death certificate. No bill of sale. No trace. She was gone from Belmont, one way or another, before the next surviving plantation inventory. The diary waited. 72 years. Pressed between oilcloth, sealed behind a false panel in the study wall, a space someone had built with purpose, a pocket the house itself did not acknowledge. Through Civil War. Through emancipation. Through the long slow decay of the big house into a private residence. Through decades when the oaks grew wilder and the fields turned fallow. The panel held. The book held. The words held. Until the spring of 1923, when hammers and crowbars opened the wall and light fell on leather binding for the first time since 1857. The scholars who published the first formal analysis in 1948 called it a document that defies easy summary, not because it is unclear, but because its contents are too vast, too dense with lived reality, to be reduced. It is, they wrote, above all a testament to endurance. Not the spectacular kind, flight, rebellion, victory, but the grinding, daily, meticulous endurance of people who faced every instrument of society arrayed against them and still found ways to persist, to connect, to witness, to remember, to refuse erasure. R did not escape Belmont. She did not overthrow it. She could not halt the cruelties she chronicled. But she documented them. She concealed the record inside the master's own words. She trusted an unknown future to receive it. Someone did. What remains is not resolution. History rarely offers clean endings. What remains is a question carved into every page, What does it mean to bear witness when no one in power will listen? What does it mean that Edmund felt something organized moving in the corners of his house in 1854, wrote it once, and then returned to silence? What does it mean that Catherine acted limited, partial, imperfect, and yet that limited action removed one architect of torment? What does it mean that a 16-year-old boy looked at an overseer and stopped him with nothing but his eyes? What does it mean that ours final entry begins with the light on the kitchen floor and the taste of good coffee, ordinary mercies preserved amid extraordinary violation? And what does it mean that 72 years later, workers pulled a book from a wall and the hidden voice of Belmont finally spoke? "We were here," she wrote. And because she wrote it, because she hid it where the house could not find it, we know. We know now. If this story has settled into your bones the way it has into mine, tell me in the comments, what part of ours words haunts you most? Do you believe the diary told the full truth, or are there still silences even she could not fill? Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who won't be able to look away once they start listening. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. These stories are still being uncovered. More walls are still waiting to be opened. We'll meet again in the next one.